before you stretch an endless expanse of pure white light, so absolute that it defies comprehension, consuming all. Time itself is but an illusion here. 10 million years flicker by like the blink of an eye. It, or something that was once it, is the sole remaining consciousness. This is a world the shadow can never again threaten. But does that make it a world at all? If it could return to that single, pivotal moment, could fate be rewritten? Stepping into Natlan, you are immediately pulled into a mysterious space, and inside, we see rift hounds ganging up on a saurian, these creatures that are native to Natlan. By saving this saurian, a mysterious pop-up shows and mentions two key details: reach out to me, and chosen of dragons. If we follow this pop-up, it allows us to transform into these saurians, creating their physical bodies, a process called saurian indwelling. While we can say that this is a mini showcase for the new feature we have for Natlan, it's quite curious what it means for its lore. So, as we transform into the saurian we saved, we see another mini version of it trapped in a holographic prison. By then, it's another saving day moment for the traveler. Once it was free, we bound its wound with a scarf and gave it a name. Conversing with this little saurian, it seems that it doesn't have any clue on where they are or where they're from. So, in the meantime, it joins us as we try to figure out its real home. Taking a closer look at this little one, it has a red mark, but we ignore whatever this is as we exit the mysterious space, thus continuing our trek towards the rest of Natlan. Little did we know that this little saurian now following us had their own journey in the region. Not knowing what lies in store, it all had to do with this red mark. So, what is this red mark? Well, as we were making our way to the stadium, the center of Natlan's people, we were interrupted by this stranger and noticed our saurian companion bearing this red mark. This is called the Flame Lord's Blessing. Now, this stranger claims to be from the Saurian Relics Association, basically a group full of collectors and archaeologists who study ancient customs. He introduces himself as Manku and explains that any saurian having this mark makes them unique to other normal saurians. Despite his explanations, this is actually related to their ancestry, wherein it comes from a noble bloodline of dragons. You see, in Natlan, saurians descended from dragons. They turned to these little creatures caused by evolutionary changes over time. We can call them lesser dragons. In real life, this is similar to how some birds today can be traced back to dinosaurs. So anyways, back to the quest. Our little saurian companion having this red mark had certain repercussions where in most cases could lead to death. However, there is a solution, further shared to us by Manku, that we can remove this mark by visiting a volcano. But before entering said volcano, it requires us to find two pieces. These two pieces are the Golden Entreaty, separated into two locations. Since one location was still unreleased by this time, you first check out the nearest one, past the Children of Echoes, and inside the set of ruins here. But how did we know that a Golden Entreaty was stashed here? Here's the curious part. While it was Manku who told us this information, and given that he is from the Relics Association who would normally know these sorts of things, there is actually more to his real identity which we will get to later. So anyways, heading inside the ruins, there were a couple of puzzles which we breezed through, but as we reached the end, we saw a huge mural showing two figures standing side by side. These two figures are Shibalanke and the Sage of the Stolen Flames, each holding something which are in fact the Golden Entreaty, the ones we are looking for. As we enter deeper into the ruins, we encounter another set of murals, one showing a person standing atop what seems to be a dragon, and another one that is more sinister, one whose appearance is different from the dragon shown in the other mural, a large winged black dragon on a silver tree. Now, if we continue our search, we find ourselves on a set of staircases leading underground. Inside, we fight a rift hound and finally obtain the first piece of the golden entreaty. So, the question is, who are these figures in these different murals? These ones in the first mural, or this winged black dragon? To answer those, let's take a step back further into the past, a time where nothing existed but these said dragons. Once, when this planet was not yet known as Teyvat, it was seen as a little world at the edge of the Genshin universe. This was detailed in the Finale of the Deep gallery set, where it says, "A faint glimmer shined from an unremarkable little world at the edge of the spiral arm, and from that world bore a primeval dragon." This primeval dragon being the one we saw in this mural. Its name was Nibelung, and at that time, his appearance was very different from this portrayal of him as the black-winged dragon here. At this point, dragons were the sole inhabitants of this planet, and we could regard them as the humans. As for Nibelung, he was their ruler, their king, or their alpha. Being their king, Nibelung also had co-rulers alongside him. These were the 7 dragon sovereigns, each having control over destruction, birth, space, and more. Now, I just want to point out that they also worshipped 3 moon sisters, whose names were Arya, Sonnet, and Canon, safeguarding their planet. Now, from this finale set, it also mentions a voyager, a woman who travels the universe and records the status of different planets in this universe, documenting their rise up until their inevitable doom. Initially, she has seen numerous planets or civilizations be destroyed because of their fated path. Reading this line, it's a really chilling realization that there were more others out there. So the line here says, charting countless peoples and civilizations fated to perish, pondering the ultimate truths of the cosmos in that eternal darkness. Simply, she is sort of a scribe, which is specified from this line here, with a duty bound never to commune with primordial civilizations. This scribe was drifting through the vast void. Now, there are a number of these scribes traversing through the universe, and they have this sort of agreement or oath that they should not make any contact with any civilization they encounter, being more of an observer. However, because the scribe saw how this little planet had a thriving civilization that might eventually surpass all those others just recorded, she decided to just sort of ignore their sacred oath and met with Nibelung. Then, as she meets with Nibelung, she begins to warn him of his civilization's fated doom. So, instead of this path, the scribe invites Nibelung to travel the stars alongside her. Basically, she wants both her and Nibelung to go on this world tour, or maybe universe tour? Anyways, Nibelung refuses her, explaining that his people, the dragons, are the essence of his existence and is even willing to be the bulwark that shields this realm. With this response, the scribe then promises to return and check on the progress of the civilization later on. Now, before we go to what happened next, let's take a closer look at this dragon civilization. Since I mentioned the sovereigns alongside Nibelung earlier, one of these dragon sovereigns is Xiucatl, this dragon shown in this mural. Now, as the Pyro Dragon sovereign, Xiucatl was born from a primordial flame, gaining the title of the Lord of the Primordial Flame. As Xiucatl's first act, he created the phlogiston, a material capable of absorbing and assimilating everything, embodying the attribute of destruction itself. Through this phlogiston, Xiucatl poured his knowledge and wisdom into the said material, which allows the normal dragons to use it to learn and grow. Thanks to this phlogiston, the dragons did not need to search for anything more, since it was all given to them by Xiucatl. To put it in a simpler way, imagine a rich parent spoiling their children and giving them anything they could ever want. Food, shelter, a brand new car or gadget, or just tons of cash where you won't ever need to have a job to sustain your lifestyle. Now, how about this? Who is this shown here? Well, this is the Sage of the Stolen Flame, whose real name is Kukulkan. We first know him as the Sage of the Stolen Flame, but this was just a title given and used by Natlantea's historians in their scrolls. A few actually only know his real name. So, going back to Xiucatl, as he was born, it was also here when Kukulkan was also created, gaining the title of Regent. second to Shukatal's authority. This makes him the younger brother of Shukatal. Looking back on the use of phlogiston and how this eventually spoiled the dragons, Shukatal and Kukulkan had different opinions on this. While Shukatal was more devoted to his people and had no trouble carrying most of the burden for them, for Kukulkan he saw it as a weakness, since this dependence might not last forever. It also seems that this is opposite to what the scribe foresaw from this civilization. Then, this weakness was eventually exploited by a being from outside their worlds who invaded and took their home away from them. At this point, it's still a question as to why this being visited this planet, but this being's name is Phanes, also called the Primordial One, the Usurper, or even the Heavenly Principles, the first descender of the planet. Now, I think these titles here were given from an outside source rather than this being itself. It's still unknown how the writer of the book Sun and Moon learned its name, since it was only mentioned in that book. So anyways, when Phanes took this planet for their own and created its 4 shades, it basically colonized the dragons. As for the sovereigns, it froze Shukatal in the same phlogiston he created, acting as his prison. Afterwards, the Phanes then created Teyvat and encased the whole area in a protective dome. We know it as the fake sky phenomenon. The only known reason for this is that this Primordial One wanted to protect Teyvat and did not want it to be seen from any potential outsiders. It's also possible that Phanes wanted to avoid his soon-to-be civilization to have the same fate as the countless civilizations that the scribe saw traversing through the universe. So, with Teyvat fully complete, Phanes had one last thing to do, which was to introduce the human race, allowing them to build these magnificent cities. In the book Before Sun and Moon, the writer describes this as the Ark's opening, being this symbolic event similar to when Noah saved his family and each pair of every animal. In this situation, it seems that these humans Phanes brought to his new world to Teyvat are the animals who were in need of saving. Now from here on out, the humans multiplied and began the era of the first civilization, with different nations scattered all over Teyvat, with its capital named as Hyperborea. The finale set describes this capital city as a city of gold. Keep in mind that during this, the Primordial One also created the Seelie race, angels that would guide his human civilization. Lastly, the Primordial One also formed the 7 known elements. From the phlogiston, the same material Shukatal created, seemingly to act as a mockery towards the dragons. At this point, the Primordial One seems to be mocking the dragons from here on out. Already taking away their home was enough, but using their own creations for your own gain was another dagger for the dragons. Now, what did the dragons do next? Well, some of the surviving dragons weren't set on just giving their home planet to an outsider. No, here, after the Dragon Sovereign's defeat, Nibelung went outside to the universe and promised that he would one day return with a power that could defeat this Primordial One. Sort of a MacArthur moment saying, "I shall return." So in the meantime, the surviving dragons had to wait while they endured living alongside the humans. Now, remember the scribe? Since she promised to return to this planet, she soon saw a different one ruling over it. We can read this from this line, "But when the Voyager returned once more, the world she remembered had been utterly changed. The bones of the earth had been bound beneath the rule of 4 shades, and the soft white radiance of the sky, being the phlogiston, had been split into 7 elements." Surprised by this sudden change, she decided to visit this planet now called Teyvat, and disguised herself as a young boy. Here we could say that she's a high candidate for being the second descender of the planet. But wait, how? Aren't descenders only called that way because they either have the will to rival this world's laws, or one who can transcend the gods? Well, we'll get to that because it seems that this scribe had something to do with the fall of the Seelie race. So as the scribe was visiting this city of gold that the Primordial One created, she learned a lot of things. 1. The people from this city had priests who worshipped an ashen silver tree, being the Great Irminsul tree. 2. The people should never go for the pursuit of knowledge or create new life, since this is considered as sinful and punishable. 3. The scribe met the first angel, who was binded to the duty of forever guiding the different nations of Teyvat. We could say that this first angel has a similar role to that of a Vestal Virgin. Long story short, Vestal Virgins are women selected from an early age to tend and keep the sacred flame burning inside the temple of Vesta, the Roman goddess of home and family. They also take a vow of virginity, and this duty lasts up to 30 years, which is quite a long time. So anyways, back to the lore. Upon meeting this first angel, she was set free from this duty and fell in love with the scribe, who was still in the form of a young boy. Long story short, they then started to plan a rebellion against the Primordial One, wishing for a world where no one will no longer look towards such gods for purpose and worship. In Teyvat, it was forbidden for anyone besides the Primordial One to create life, but despite this, the first angel created the Snowland Fae using the bones of dragons. This was a new race with the purpose of merging with the world. However, the three Moon Sisters saw this happen, but it wasn't explained if they reported it to the Primordial One. Now, as this was all happening, eventually, Nibelung fulfilled his promise and returned to Teyvat. Here he returns with the Abyss, the bane of all civilizations, and now appears as the black-winged dragon we can see from this mural. This Abyss is a sinister power that corrupts any living being. To put in another simpler way, this was some sort of a virus installed by Nibelung into the Primordial One's computer. However, when we thought the other dragons would rejoice from his return, he saw that most of the dragons were living in harmony with the humans. Calling back to when Apep mentioned this line, some of the dragons have grown close to the humans and have forgotten all about our hatred from when the world was taken from us. Despite this, some dragons, including Apep, still followed Nibelung and joined his war against the Primordial One, making them imbued with the Abyss, corrupting them. With this, Kukulkan was also able to break free from his prison, mentioned in this line here. When the Dragon King Nibelung descended from beyond the skies, Kukulkan was called forth by the Abyss and awoke from his long dream. In this war, it was so destructive that it caused the whole of Teyvat to shake, the ley lines roots of the Irminsul to be damaged, and portions of the human civilizations to be separated, recalling back to when the Enkanomians became trapped underground. It also caused the Golden City, Hyperborea, to be destroyed and killed 2 of the 3 Moon Sisters. Sadly, this war between Nibelung and the Primordial One resulted in another loss for the dragons' side, but it greatly weakened the Primordial One. So what was the scribe doing during all this? During this, while the scribe and the first angel wanted to rebel against Thanes, they too wanted to keep Teyvat safe. But since Nibelung came back with the Abyss, being the very thing the scribe feared, they joined in the war and managed to stop Nibelung. As soon as the Primordial One emerged victorious, it wanted to set things right for his unruly planet. The Abyss introduced by Nibelung were now corrupting the land, 2 of the Moon Sisters dead, the first angel neglecting her duty and creating a new life. So the Primordial One decides to do something unexpected. So what did it do next? From the finale of the Deep Galleries, it further details by mentioning how deep blue crystal spikes were dropped from the sky. These spikes being the celestial nails. The Primordial One dropped the celestial nails after Nibelung's death, and also punished the Seelie race for the first angel's actions in creating new life. This then turned the Seelies into wisps of light, which we can see now. With that, the Primordial One decided to appoint Archons who would continue the Primordial One's will since it got too weak from the war against Nibelung. It was then here where the Gnosis were created, formed from the dead remains of a 3rd descender, which is likely Nibelung. You see, in forming the Gnosis, it isn't just to enhance compatibility with the 7 elements, but to also keep them in and keep Teyvat safe. So this explains why some rejected the Gnosis, such as Andreas and King Deshret, because 1. Andreas did not actually care for humanity and their safety, and 2. King Deshret did not want his people to live under the rule of Thanes. One case of Nibelung being the 3rd descender is from the line he mentioned in this line, "Let my bones be the bulwark that shields this realm and bear witness to the path I have chosen, for I shall lead my people onward to the stars." The scribe must have remembered this from Nibelung and thus created the Gnosis, together with Thanes. Now, wait, where was Shukaral in all of this? The Pyro Dragon Sovereign, in case we've forgotten. Well, after Nibelung's death, he was able to fake his death to cover up any tracks of the Primordial One finding him. Luckily for him, it seems that the Primordial One was too busy being sick. So here, Shukaral was then able to reclaim part of Teyvat, naming it as Natlantea, and built the city inside this volcano, as well as other more cities surrounding the area. Since there were dragons who survived this war, most of them migrated to this area of Natlantea. However, some surviving humans from the Primordial One civilization also found their way to Natlantea, turning it to a place where both dragon and human now coexisted, but this left the humans as the inferior race. Now keep in mind that it was also here when the Night Kingdom was created. After Nibelung and Phanes' war, since the ley lines from the Irminsul became weak in the area, Wansui managed to repair the damage, thus becoming the Lord of Night. However, it was left undiscovered at this time up until later. So anyways, at this point, Shukaral was still corrupted by the Abyss, and this caused him to sleep most of the time, so he entrusted the rule of Natlantea to 13 dragon lords he appointed, as well as with his brother, Kukulkan. Since Kukulkan is the regent, he was the only one to personally communicate with Shukaral when he was awake. Basically, the Primordial One at this point was recovering from its injuries, while Shukaral was dealing with a case of a high fever. Despite Shukaral's condition, the dragons at Natlantea were still devoted to him, even entrusting most of their duties to their dragon sovereign. He built their structures, their cities, and even these secret source automatons to act as their security force. Because of this, Kukulkan shared to his brother how the dragons of Natlantea have been squabbling like children, and were spoiled due to what Shukaral has done for them, pointing out that this is still a huge problem for their survival as a race. So Kukulkan presents a solution. He wants their race's survival to continue through the human race. This is because Kukulkan saw how the humans, despite their weak and frail state, showed strength and continuously surviving and evolving, qualities that were lacking from the dragons, and one human could lead both races to a better future. But despite this idea, Shukaral did not agree. He did not trust the humans, since he did not want to place the fate of his beloved people in the hands of another race. But you see, with the Abyss corruption worsening within the volcano, time was running out for the dragons, since from their perspective, they were the only ones left of their race. Being corrupted with the Abyss, this would inevitably destroy their already weak civilization and lead to their extinction. So it was here when Shukaral decided to create a device, something that could revert everything in Natlantea into phlogiston. This device being Huitzilopochtli, the sweeping skyfire. The dragons would surrender their physical forms and all come into a soul consciousness, some sort of a hive mind, making them exist eternally and share knowledge together. So first, he created artificial stars, and thought of a way to purify the whole of Teyvat, cleaning out the Abyss and ensuring that his people would never be tainted again. This whole sequence was actually foreshadowed in the book Men of Lethene, sharing the same plot points and this whole hive mind story. So anyways, if this was all for the dragons, what about the humans living in Natlantea? Turns out that Shukaral did not care for their fate. Now, to achieve his plan, Shukaral intended to offer himself as the first experimental subject to activate the machine, sacrificing his body for the eternal survival of the kingdom. While this sounds like a crazy idea, most dragons fully agreed to the plan. Some even voluntarily surrendered their bodies to become beings of the phlogiston. However, only Kukulkan opposed it, refusing to accept his brother's sacrifice. So Shukaral granted Kukulkan a choice. If his brother really believed in humanity, then he should either let them come to stop him or become part of the destructive capabilities of this device. In the meantime, Shukaral went back to his sleep, waiting for Kukulkan's plan to succeed. Now, don't let this fool you, since despite his condition, all he needed was to just use his eye in continuing with his alternative desire. So here, Kukulkan stole a pyrophosphorite from Shulkotl to give the humans a chance. Inside this phosphorite are secrets stored by the dragons related to their technologies, sort of a knowledge capsule from Sumeru. Given time, Kukulkan first built a floating domain, the Hananpacha, and wanted to test the humans if they were worthy. Luckily, a human named Chak was the first human to visit, and soon more humans followed, turning to this phosphorite for knowledge. In the time that followed, the humans eventually grew in number and founded different 7 tribes. However, instead of uniting behind a single banner, these 7 tribes began fighting with one another. Imagine this tribe fighting with these people here. That seems like the full premise of a nation of war. Because of this, Kukulkan was disappointed with what humanity had led to after he shared the phosphorite. So instead, Kukulkan tries another method, and here comes the story behind his son, Ochkin. I want to point out that this is just something I pieced from reading the description from the Sanctum of Rainbow Spirit's domain and the council records from the volcano. Since it was mentioned that Kukulkan was disheartened by this state of affairs, he withdrew and sealed the Hananpacha, where he first taught the secrets to humans. Then, from the council records, the dragons mentioned about how the tribes were busy in fighting, so there's that. Now, eventually, the 13 Dragon Lords learned of this, and some of them saw Kukulkan to be a traitor. It was noted in the council records that they removed Kukulkan from his position of regent. It's also interesting that the council records detail how the Dragon Lords wanted to manipulate the human tribes and keep them disorganized, so as to prevent any rebellion against them. So what did Kukulkan do next? He disguised himself as a human and met with a young woman. Kukulkan then had a son he named Ochkin, his vision of being the one to stop the infighting amongst the tribes and unite them, eventually ruling over both humans and dragons. When Ochkin was still a young child, Kukulkan brought him to his laboratory in an attempt to observe his growth and condition. This is noted from the Nest experiment log. It reads, "The subject exhibits strength and regenerative capabilities far beyond those of the average adult human male, and has even shown itself capable of snatching food from the Vishops." But something happened, and some of the dragons did not approve of Ochkin to inherit the Flame Lord's blessing, so they sent him back to one of their cells and planned to use lethal injection to kill him. However, Kukulkan learned of this and carefully planned for his escape. First, Kukulkan secretly opened the cells, allowing Ochkin to be free. Once the dragons learned of his escape, they sent someone to find him. But Kukulkan volunteered for this task and faked his report back of having killed the prisoner. Now, with Ochkin free from the lab, he doesn't actually know who freed him, but his hate for the dragons started from here. Then he meets Xbalanque, this person here in the mural. In time, Ochkin allies with Xbalanque and learns of the conditions that the human tribes endured under the dragons, fueling more of his hatred. Now, with Xbalanque, it's clear that he was tired of how the human tribes were divided and didn't see the clear picture of what they could do if united. So Xbalanque begins uniting the tribes and turns their attention to the dragons. Suddenly, a rebellion was beginning to stir up. Unknown to Kukulkan, he did not expect this Xbalanque to be the one who would unite the human tribes and lead a war against the Dragon Lords and Shulkotl, something that was supposed to be for Ochkin. Turning to the Dragon Lords, since this was becoming a huge issue, a meeting was conducted in this place, suggesting that they should purge the human tribes and limit their progress. In the end, some Dragon Lords thought that this would only cause them to rebel, and the suggestion was disapproved. But nevertheless, the rebellion continued and started a war within Natlantea. Assuming that this rebellion lasted for a long time, since Xbalanque did a lot during this time, he tipped the scale of power and defeated 10 of the 13 sovereign rulers at the time. As for the last 3, 2 were killed by hero twins and Eunuku, while the other is currently trapped in a statue underneath Ochkin, which I'll get to later. Now, if you think about it, this feat was amazing despite his state as a human. But it was revealed that he had some help before he decided to act against the dragons. This was a secret pact with the Shade of Death, Renova. a pact where he had the power to avoid death and be resurrected. It honestly feels like Xbalanque just activated a cheat code for this one. So with this pact, Xbalanque began storming the volcano with the help of Ochkin, and it came to this final duel between him and Xiucatl. The details of the fight revealed that Xbalanque knew where Xiucatl's weak spot was. It was his eye. So combining the lines from the book, Records of Hanenpacha, and from the recent world quest, Xbalanque pierced Xiucatl's eye as they both fell deep within the volcano. With this fall, both of them died. However, Xbalanque knew this was coming, and together with the power he gained from Renova, he was eventually resurrected, shown in this mural. He then gouged out Xiucatl's eye and separated this into two, recalling back to the Golden Entreaty. Going back to the quest, I want to add a little note here. This fight sequence we just had is actually an imitation of the fight between Xbalanque and Xiucatl all those years ago, us emulating Xbalanque, and this Rifthound here emulating Xiucatl, giving hints that Xiucatl was corrupted by the Abyss at the time. Now, returning to the surface, we show Manku the Golden Entreaty we found, and plan to move on to the second location, Ochkanatlan, the Cinder City. As we continue our journey towards Ochkanatlan, upon entry, a cutscene triggers where a dragon suddenly pops up and attacks us, trapping us in a tower. The traveler notes that this dragon is unlike the other ones we encountered, and hints that it could be guarding something really important, or just keeping visitors away from something they should never see. Before we exited said tower, a girl wearing the clothes of the Flower Feather clan stopped us. This girl's name is Bona, and claims to be an adventurer. There was something sus about her, since despite claiming to be an adventurer, doesn't know about the Adventurers Guild. But long story short, she was an adventurer following in her father's footsteps, trying to search for the same Golden Entreaty. So as we press on, we encounter another mural, similar to the ones we saw in the first location. While it looks like Xbalanque, this figure here is actually Ochkin, imitating Xbalanque's pose. Now, despite meeting this mysterious person, since we are in the nation of friendship, we begin to trust them immediately. Anyways, this Bona also shares that she's not alone, and has this little buddy accompanying her, named Kokoik. With their help, we managed to fend off the dragon we encountered earlier, and reached a secret part of Ochkanatlan, a floating space called the Natlantea. While Natlan's legends describe the place as something that Ochkin built and where he stored his countless treasures, it was actually built by Xiucatl as part of the Huitzli-Pochli device. There are 3 levels within this place, and it requires us to carefully position them using this mechanism in the center. Upon positioning its ship to the right one, we were close to finally obtaining the second piece of the Golden Entreaty. However, as soon as we were about to get it, the dragon that attacked us earlier snatched it and dived below. Chasing this dragon, we stop it dead in its tracks deep below the surface. We'll get this flashback when we defeat the dragon. So, now who is this dragon, and who is Kokoik? It's Ochkin, who split his soul into 2, one being the dragon and the other being his human soul. As soon as he surrenders the second piece, we get this flashback of his memories. Going back to the timeline, after Xbalanque killed Xiucatl and split his eye into the Golden Entreaty, he was aware of the weapon that Xiucatl created, so he kept the first piece of the Golden Entreaty and entrusted the second to Kukulkan, who allied himself to Xbalanque. They even had this pact in the same ruins we first explored. Now, in defeating Xiucatl, Xbalanque obtains the Gnosis and becomes the first Pyro Archon, promising to spare the surviving dragons under his rule. He also strengthened the Night Kingdom and established the rules for the Ode of Resurrection. Years passed, and since Xbalanque was just a human, he eventually died. After his death, Ochkin stepped up as the new leader for Natlan and relocated to Chichen Uktuka, a city that once belonged to one of the 13 Dragon Lords. Rebuilding the area, he soon renamed it to Ochkanatlan. Now, everything was going quite well. Saurians were living alongside humans, the tribes were united, there were heroes helping one another. But I think this all changed when Ochkin saw something deep inside Natlan. Remember the secret source automatons created by Shukaral as the dragon's defense force? Well, Ochkin wanted to take advantage of these creations and started to dig for answers hidden in his city. Eventually, he met with Ixtlo, the 8th Dragon Lord, and demanded to lend him the Sword of Keys in controlling these secret source automatons. Ixtlo refused, and Ochkin trapped her within this dragon statue, keeping her there for almost 1,000 years. So with that, Ochkin instead built his own power system, something that could rival that of the dragons. This is the core of Chulel. With this, Ochkin was able to gain control of the technology scattered there. Their old defense systems, their robots, and even the furnaces. Now, at some point, something was stirring beneath the city. This was the Abyss, creeping their way up to the surface. So, Ochkin decided to blow the entrances, despite some artisans and miners left inside. Most of these miners eventually died, but one managed to survive. This was Manku. So, wait. Wasn't this thousands of years ago? How was Manku able to live all these years? Now, we'll get to that. So anyways, due to this possible Abyss threat, Ochkin decided to look for a solution. Maybe a weapon. Something that the old dragons had in their time. Here he looks at the golden entreaty Xbalanque once had and tries to find the answer behind what this golden entreaty could do. In search of answers, he eventually goes to the volcano, where it all ended. Inside the volcano, Ochkin learns about Huitzilopochtli and is terrified of its capability. Realizing the dark truth behind the golden entreaty, he refuses to activate the weapon and leaves the volcano. So he hid this piece inside the Tonatiuh, gaining more hatred towards the dragons that he thought imprisoned him. This was when he began ordering the extermination of Saurians all across Natlan. This led to some tribes divided and causing a great civil war. As this was brewing, Ochkin was still dealing with the Abyss threat that was already beginning to corrupt his people. We can see this with notes scattered when we were in Natlan. So to save his people, and not allow the control system of the city to malfunction, he decided to split his soul into two, one from his dragon blood and one from his human form. The soul forming his dragon form is the same one we fought, while the soul with the human form is Kokowik. However, his people saw it as madness and formed another rebellion against him. Leading them was the Red-Eyed Youth, who inherited Xbalanque's blessing and put an end to Ochkin's reign, burning Natlan and becoming the second Pyro Archon. Back to the world quest, as soon as we received the second piece of the golden entreaty, we get a first glimpse of Kukulkan, and it turns out he wasn't a silver dragon, as opposed to what Natlan's records describe him to be. Here he converses with our little Saurian companion, and behind him is another mural depicting different stages of his plan. By the end, it all comes now to the last piece of the puzzle, as we continue now to the volcano. So after hearing a lot about this volcano, theories or comments about this place, we decided to see it for ourselves, and it was disappointing. Well, not the story, definitely not that, but how it took to get there. It was a hassle to go through all this, and I didn't enjoy the idea that if I had certain characters, the experience would be easier. I really hated using these Cocosaurs to traverse some parts of the area since it was very clunky to use. So anyways, to continue with the story, we finally reached the domain of the dragons. Turns out that the ancient dragons of Natlan, contrary to what we thought, were more humanoid in form. They had these modes of transportation, power mechanisms, androids that run the system, and a whole courtroom. As a quick note, let's turn our attention to these little robots, the secret source servants. While they look similar to their bigger counterparts, they don't share the same creators. These robots here were created by some scientist dragons who tried to imitate Shukatal's automatons. Now, as you reach the courtroom, we also learn that these dragons have built a security system that counters any traces of the Abyss. Upon going further down to where Shukatal was, we are stopped by a draconic automaton and traps us in a holographic prism. Fortunately, our little companion wasn't included, and it is here where Kukulkan appeared again in person. Here it was all revealed on who the Chosen of Dragon really is. It was our little companion, bearing the red mark. Turns out that for years after Ochkin's reign, Kukulkan has been searching for another Saurian with the Flame Lord's blessing to come visit the volcano. Since Kukulkan's plan B failed, where he hoped Ochkin would continue his dream, Kukulkan turned now to what Shukatl initially planned to do, turning Natlan into a sea phlogiston, and only the next evolution of dragons would survive, making them free of abyssal corruption. However, in his years of search, no Saurian bearing the mark ever survived, until our little companion. So remember the voice that first appeared to us back to where we saved our little companion the first time? It was Kukulkan. It was also him who disguised himself as Manku and led us to this quest. In Natlan, it was also him who took Bona's appearance, leading us to the Entreaty. As for the real Manku and Bona, they were in fact real humans, but they have been long dead. Kukulkan has only mimicked their appearance to lead our little companion to the volcano. It all points back as to why Bona suddenly disappeared when Kukulkan appeared himself to our little companion. Still, it was nice meeting the real Bona during that last act of the Argon quest. Now, as Kukulkan tours us inside the deepest parts of the volcano, we can see the corpse and weapon of Shukatl, a massive dragon slain thousands of years ago. Here, the sage leads our little companion to the control panel for the doomsday device, Huitzli-Pochli. Below, it shows the entirety of Natlan, if not the whole of Teyvat, indicating that the planet is covered in a dome created by Fanes, recalling back to that fake sky detail. So with this, Kukulkan pressures our little companion to make the decision that Shukatl was supposed to do in the past, activate the Huitzli-Pochli, and in turn destroy the whole of Natlan. Kukulkan also shares that by doing this, our little companion will become the Pyro Dragon Sovereign of this new future. I was curious if there was a cutscene or a preview for this, so I tried activating it, but it was just a flash of light and a text train. Despite having this possible outcome, we will be turned back to that moment and instead make the decision not to activate the device. After this, Kukulkan shares an important detail, saying that years before, he and Ochkin also made the same decision as our little companion. In the final moments, Kukulkan tries to stop our little companion but fails. It must be hard to see all your plans come crashing down and expecting the same mistake be repeated over and over again. Now, since our little companion chose to spare Natlan and continue this future of Saurians and humans living alongside together, it then leaves the area and returns back to us, beating this mechanical dragon aside and exiting the volcano. Outside, while the red mark is still visible, it no longer has the faint warmth, indicating that the Flame Lord's blessing was finally removed. As for Kukulkan, he remains inside the city and mentions that he finally understands his brother's feelings. By then, we don't know what happened to him, or if he would ever return. After our little companion celebrates with us for this quest, taking a photo together, it then leaves and goes on its own journey, bidding a final farewell to the traveler and Paimon, thus finally closing the book of this story. Okay, now I want to take a moment to breathe because this was just wow. Piecing everything together from the new artifact sets to this world quest, it was quite a long journey. I assume this is all from what we learned in the world quest, together with the lore from the artifact set and the Moon Sisters web event. So if you're still here, I really want to thank you for watching the video. I admit things are quite difficult to explain, but I tried adding some relatable situations here and there so that it would be easier to follow. Lastly, I want to apologize for the late upload. I know I mentioned that this should have been posted before the month of March ended, but it was just too long, and I wanted to really flesh out all the details. As for the next video, I'm planning to do one for Wuthering Waves, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Anyways, my name is KlemenTime. Be safe and stay tuned.